It's time to get out the vote. The vote's for women. Hey everyone, it's Kylie here at Games Unlimited in Pittsburgh, and today I get to talk to you about votes for women. We got this one very recently, just in time for Women's History Month. I've had a chance to play it over the weekend, want to tell you a little bit about it. One of the things I'm so excited for about this game is that it basically plays like a card-driven war game. Now, the sort of classic card-driven mechanism that's made very popular by something like Twilight Struggle is a mechanism that's really cool that I personally love in games, but all too often, most of the time, it's married to some sort of historical war game context, which is great if you're a fan of that sort of gaming, but if you want something that's also historical, also uses this great mechanism, but doesn't necessarily deal with the violence of war, you usually don't have a lot of options. Votes for Women gives you one of those options. So this is focused on the women's suffrage movement in the United States. It says on the box, we're talking 1848 to 1920. In truth, in many ways, it started with the Declaration of Independence. A side note, the game includes so many awesome historical artifacts, including a letter from Abigail Adams to her husband, John Adams, back in 1776 at the Continental Congress, basically imploring him to, don't forget women, possibly give us the right to vote. That letter was circulated again at the start of the women's suffrage movement in 1848. Of course, women didn't get the constitutional right to vote until 1920, but this sort of explores that whole landscape, that whole, what are we talking, 70-year landscape, the impact of things like the Civil War and the 15th Amendment on that, the impact of the possibility of prohibition on that. So a lot of cool historical things. If you've never played a historical game like this before, obviously it's very interesting if you are interested in that subject matter. But I found when I've played a lot of these games, I become interested. It's sort of like when you play a game like an IP, a licensed game, like a Harry Potter or a Marvel game, you're invested because you know the backstory, you know the characters. With something like this, even if you don't know that backstory, you get interested and you start to learn about it. So another cool thing about Votes for Women is that it is a very, very simple, probably the simplest card-driven, what I'll call a card-driven war game style, historical card-driven game that I have ever played. I mean, I could teach this to just about anyone. As you see, there's a giant map of the 48 states of the United States at that time, and you're going to be placing cubes, either for suffrage or for the opposition to suffrage, on the various states. Now, the suffrage party actually has two things they need to do. They've got to get Congress to approve the possibility of amending the Constitution to give women the right to vote. And once that happens, they have to get 36 of the states to ratify that before 13 states, because we need three-quarters of the states have to ratify it in order for it to become a constitutional amendment. So during the game, the suffrage side is going to be placing cubes out there because once Congress approves, the state's going to need 4 votes, sort of 4 cubes from your side in order to approve it. But if they get 4 cubes from the opposition side, they get a big X on there, that's going to deny it. So if you're playing the opposition side, there are 2 ways to win. You can go 6 turns without having Congress actually set this bill in, approve the possibility of sending it to the states. Or even if that happens, if you can get 13 states to reject the amendment, you win the game. So the sides play fairly similarly. The suffrage side has more campaigners. You're going to be sending campaigners out to the different regions, rolling some dice to be able to place some cubes out there. Of course, all of these cards include historical personalities, a little bit of flavor about that person or that event. Here's gerrymandering here. And another thing it does that's super cool, the women's suffrage movement wasn't a united front. Particularly immigrants, women of color had a different experience, and some of the women some women were anti-suffrage because they didn't want suffrage for all women, just particularly white women. And that's represented by the suffrage side actually having to place cubes of 2 different colors. They're yellow cubes or purple cubes. And some of the opposition cards are going to target one or the other to represent some of that infighting within the movement. So about a 45 minute to an hour long game, very easy to set up. It has a solo mode, and crucially, because a lot of times with games like this, one of the players doesn't really want to play the opposition side, there is a way to play it 2-player cooperative against what they call the Oppobot, card-driven automated opponent that plays the opposition side. So that's Votes for Women. Definitely one to come check out. If you've never played a sort of historical card-driven game before, this is a fantastic first step into that world. Yeah, please come on down to Games Unlimited. I am Kylie. We're going to have this one out on display. Ask us about it. Maybe take a copy home and unbox some fun.